welcome, I'm Izzy at Minerva. We're going to be looking today at how to hack or how to alter our very own Tracey Jacket Minerva Exclusive sewing pattern. As you can see in the image next to me here, this is what the pattern looks like currently, and we are going to alter it to look like this. So we're going to hack it from a jacket into a shirt dress. The dress is going to have some gorgeous little features. It's going to have an elasticated cuff, so simplifying it down there. And then we're also, as well as lengthening it to around just above our knee length, we are also going to add a drawstring waist with a casing. So we're really going to play around with this jacket pattern piece and create something completely different. Now you might just want to think about the type of fabric you're going to use for this hack. Because it's no longer a jacket, we don't want a medium to heavyweight fabric, we want a medium to lightweight fabric. So something similar to this cord that we have here is going to work really well, and that's what I'm going to be sewing my version up in today. So as you follow along today, you're going to need the Tracey pattern, which is available to purchase on our website. You're also going to need some fabric, and you're going to need your standard pattern drafting tools, which are listed next to me here. Now, as always, with our Minerva exclusive sewing patterns, we have some amazing supporting videos for you to watch on our YouTube channel. So go and take a look at our playlist, which relates to our Minerva exclusive patterns, and you will see there that we've got a video talking about suitable fabrics that will work really well with the Tracey jacket. We've also got a video that talks about fit, how to fit the jacket if you've got some common fit adjustments that you might want to take a look at doing. And then we've also got a sew along video. So as well as the instructions, which are beautifully illustrated in the booklet, you've also got a sew along on the YouTube channel. So do take a look at that if you'd like some extra support. Now, in today's video, I am going to be showing you how to hack the pattern pieces, how to adapt them and change them, and then I'm going to cut them out as well and sew them up. At the end of the video, I am going to only show you the sewing steps that relate to the changes that we've made. If you need further support at any other point with any of the other common steps which are in the booklet, you can obviously refer to the sew along. Okay, so to start off with, you need to cut out the pattern pieces in your size, and then you can come and join me. Okay, so the very first thing that I want to do is basically lengthen the basic pattern pieces, which is the front body and the back body, so that they're lengthened by the same amount and lengthened to just above the knee. Grab your Tracey jacket hem facing and mark where the top of the facing hits the body at that point there, and that is 3 centimeters above the notch at that point. Square across, making sure that the line that you're squaring across with is perpendicular to the center front, and draw a line on the back pattern piece, which is again 3 centimeters. Cut along both those lines. Move those pieces away for 1 second, and then add a piece of paper in between. Extend the center front line of the front pattern piece down by approximately 20 centimeters and mark that point at 20 centimeters. Draw a line that is 20 centimeters offset from the current hem line, and then just very simply square up to the side seam at that point. Do the same for the back. Take hold of your front bit that you cut off earlier and just place it directly on that 20 centimeter offset line, making sure that it's sitting really nice and straight at that junction there. And do the same for the back. And then cut out those pattern pieces. So we've marked up the pattern pieces for the front and the back on the body, all the bits that we need to mark up, but we also need to alter the placket. Okay, so this is our placket, pattern piece C, and the top of the pattern piece lines up with the top of the neck up here, and you can see the notches are just lining up really beautifully, or they were until we extended it. So we're just going to do exactly the same as what we did for this pattern piece, and we're just going to draw a cut line here. Cut it out, and there we have it. We've added in the extra placket here. What I would say at this point is we need to add a couple more buttons just to extend down a little bit further. So on my size, which is the size G, the distance between my buttons is 9 centimeters. So I'm just going to mark a 9 centimeter offset down here for one more button, and then another one down here, and then another one down here. And these will become my extended button holes. Okay, and that is your front pocket piece completed. Okay, now we've lengthened the pattern pieces, I now want to create the casing that's going to go round the waist. So let's draft that out and mark it out on these pattern pieces before we then create our actual pattern piece. Okay, so working at the notch, which says the approximate waist notch location, we want to basically create a casing that is 2 centimeters wide, and it's going to go all the way around the waist. We're going to mark on the pattern piece a little dashed line which represents where the waist is located and where the top of the casing is going to be located, okay? And the same on the back. You could annotate that and say top of casing. Measure the length of this section here and make a little note of it. So for me it's 29.5, and do the same on the back. And then in a minute we will come back to this. 29.5 over here too. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is draft out our casing pattern piece. We've got the front here and we measured that length here. It was 29.5, and on the back it was also 29.5. So I want my casing to go all the way around the pattern piece, and it's basically just going to be a nice big rectangle. Add your front casing to your back casing, and then we want to remove the seam allowance here on that side, which would be 1.5 for that side and 1.5 for the other side. So then minus 3 centimeters in total. Draw a line that is that long on this piece of paper. Now we want our casing to be 2 centimeters deep, but then we also need to allow for our seam allowance of our casing. So tap 2 into your calculator and then add 3 centimeters for a seam allowance on either end, and that means we need our rectangle to be 5 centimeters deep. So draw a line that's parallel to that first line, exactly 5 centimeters. And just square down to create a perfect rectangle. And now then, annotate one side to say place on fold, and at the front on the other side, find the center line, so that's at 2.5 centimeters, and just square out a few centimeters. Annotate the seam allowance, which is going to go in and be absorbed into the placket when you sew it. And what we want to do here is mark a buttonhole location about 1 centimeter offset from that seam allowance, so about here. So just draw a little buttonhole location right here, and that is going to let our drawstring through at the centre front once we've sewn it all together. Annotate the rest of the pattern as usual to say things like grain line and to annotate the pattern piece. Okay, so now we've got our casing length, but we also want to create that drawstring pattern piece as well. So let's do that together. The drawstring obviously needs to be at least as long as our casing, plus to have enough to be able to tie a bow. So take the length of your casing and then times it by 1.3, and that will give you a nice length for your drawstring. Draw a line that is that long on your piece of paper. So our drawstring casing is 2 centimeters wide or deep. So we want to make sure that our drawstring is less than that, so it fits comfortably. So if our drawstring is 1.5 centimeters wide, it's going to be really nice and comfy. So if it's going to be 1.5 centimeters wide when it's flat, we need to have it add a seam allowance onto that. So grab your calculator, 1.5 plus 1.5 gives you the overall length that you need, but then it obviously needs to be doubled over. So times that by 2 to get 6 centimeters. Draw a line that is parallel to that first line at 6 centimeter depth. Okay, let's take a look at the sleeve pattern pieces next. So we've got pattern pieces K and L here, and we've also got M. So M is the cuff pattern piece. So we want to create an elasticated cuff rather than have the big formal cuff with the button. So basically we want to lengthen these two sleeve pieces, K and L, to the length that this sleeve would be if M was attached on. So the very first thing we're going to do is draw a line which is just that slit line there on both those pattern pieces, and the line is going to run perpendicular to the grain line here, which you can see right there. So I would just extend the grain line down so you've got a nice line to be working with, and then using that as a guide, draw a cut line across both pattern pieces at that point there. Cut along those two lines. Pattern piece M, we basically want to lengthen these pattern pieces by the length of M, but let's not forget that we have a seam allowance on the top and the bottom of pattern piece M. So if you measure the length of M, it is 8 centimetres in total, minus 1.5 and another 1.5. The extra length we want to add into the sleeve is 5 centimetres in total to accommodate for the length of M. So I want us to draw a line that is parallel to the cut line at 5 centimetres. Draw a line perpendicular to the cut line at that point on L and here at this point. Next, attach the bottom of the sleeve pattern piece right there so that it sits nice and at right angles at that junction there, and the same for the other pattern piece. And now the final thing we need to do is just to add a casing to the bottom. So lengthen the pattern piece by 1.5 centimetres. And just to keep things really simple with this pattern piece, we're just going to extend it in a nice straight line, because we're going to create the shape by adding the elastic into the sleeve, so we don't need a tailored sleeve end at this point down here. And then we're just going to square up and down 1.5 centimetres. So we've got a nice square at that point to be able to turn our facing up. Okay, and then finally we just want to straighten out and sort out this sleeve edge. So working from that point that you've just squared up from and lining it up with the top arm side up there, just draw a nice straight line. And the same on this side. And then cut out those pattern pieces, just like that. Great, so now we've done all of our pattern drafting, let's take a look at how to sew up this pattern. As mentioned before, I'm only going to demonstrate the steps which deviate from the pattern instructions, and if you want help with those instructions on how to sew the basic steps, you can obviously refer to the instruction booklet and also to the YouTube sew along. All right, let's get sewing. Okay, to start off with, we're just going to prepare our casing pattern piece. So what I've done is I've inserted a little bit of interfacing on at the back over the location of where the buttonhole is going to go. And then I have also just ironed in the seam allowance so that the raw edges touch with the wrong sides together. And what we're next going to do is to create these buttonholes. So using some chalk or a fabric pen, just mark where those buttonholes need to go and do the same at the other end as well. And then just create your buttonhole using your sewing machine, making sure that the width of it is the exact length that you've marked on here. You don't want it to extend into the seam allowance. Now just create those buttonholes using your preferred method and just separate out the fabric between the two. Repeat for the other buttonhole. And once you've done that, just make sure to press it back under again so that you've got a nice, neat casing. Okay, let's go and sew the rest of the garment as per the instructions. Okay, next we're going to sew all of the instructions exactly as they are in the book. The only thing that's different is that we've got a slightly longer body, but all the same procedures are exactly the same as per the book. And then it's when we get to step 20 is when we're just going to pause and add the casing onto the front. Okay, so here we go. We've got the pockets attached on at the front, so we've got the facings and the plackets all attached on to the whole garment. We've sewn the side seams together as well. The next thing that I want to know is where the top of the casing line needs to go. So grab your pattern piece and just using a little bit of chalk, just annotate where the top of the casing needs to go at this placket seam here, and also at the side seam over here. Do the same for the other side, the other front side. Okay, so we've got our casing here now, and basically we're just going to, I've folded over the end as well, so we've got a nice neat finish up at the top, and I'm literally just going to line that up with my chalk marking here and just pin in place. You've got the next line marking here, so just pin that in place as well, and then just continue pinning the casing so that it's sitting so nice and flat and lining up with all of your markings that you've just done. Okay, and once that's been done and you've pinned it all in place, basically we're just going to top stitch all the way around to create the casing. We're going to top stitch 2mm away from the folded edge all the way around. Okay, and there we have it. We've got our casing created with a little gap here for when we want to thread our drawstring through, and the casing has been sewn all the way around. Okay, next continue to sew the garment as per the instructions from step 21 all the way through past the collar until you hit, let's take a look, the sleeves, and then we'll come back and have a chat about that because we aren't adding the cuff, so we're going to sew it slightly differently. Okay, moving on to step 28, we're basically going to do something very similar to what they say here, but we're just not going to sew this slit down here, which is going to save us a little bit of time. Okay, so we've got our 2 sleeve pattern pieces right here, and with right sides together we're going to place the smaller sleeve, which is the undersleeve, piece L, on top of piece K, making sure that the longer sides are aligning. Now, in the instructions it says that you should stop stitching and just only pin up to the notch down there, but we are actually just going to pin all the way down and get those 2 seams joined up all the way down. So pin that side seam in place for the sleeve, lining up the notches as you go, and don't forget that because it's on a curve there's going to be a little bit of easing in between the pins, as one side will probably be slightly longer than the other. Now sew that using your standard seam allowance and finish it as it says in the instructions on step 29. Okay, and once you've sewn that seam completely all the way down, right sides together, just repeat for this other seam over here. We are just going to pin it in place and then sew using our standard seam allowance and finish using your preferred method. Okay, at this point we want to create the casing at the very bottom of the cuff. It's already quite narrow as it is, but the elastic casing is just going to give it a little bit of extra structure there. So you can finish this off in a variety of different types of ways. What I'm going to recommend is that we turn it over by 7mm like that, press that in place, and then turn it over again another 2 centimeters in order that we can top stitch it down to create that casing. Just pin those cuffs in place now all the way around so you've got that all nice and firmly fitted in. I'm just going to put a double pin in at that point there. Okay, what we're going to do is we're now going to top stitch from here, that pin there, all the way around to the double pin here when we're going to stop, and that's just going to leave a nice little casing that we can then thread our elastic through in a few minutes. Brilliant. Okay, so next grab some elastic and just wrap it around your wrist, overlap it by 1.5 centimeters and snip that length. Cut 2 pieces for both of your sleeves, and then grab your safety pins and attach one to one end completely and the other to the other end, and attach that second safety pin so that it is fixed onto the sleeve cuff on the outside like that. Brilliant. Now get your other end with your safety pin in and just thread it all the way through. Once you've got it through to the other side, we'll just remove those 2 safety pins. and then making sure that the elastic is staying flat all the way around the casing, overlap by 1.5 centimetres, and just zigzag stitch them together, just like that. And then just thread that back into the casing, and then just top stitch that remaining little section of that gap down. And there we have our really cute little cuff at the end of our sleeve. Repeat for the other side, and then insert your sleeves into the body of your garment exactly as the instructions say. Wonderful. So what we've done now is we've basically done everything we need to. We've done the whole of the pattern, but we need to create a little drawstring that's going to go through here. So let's do that next. Okay, so we have a very long drawstring pattern piece. We are just going to fold it in half, right sides together, and then just pin it all the way down the piece. Okay, great. And once it's all been pinned, what we're going to do is sew the short end, sew all the way down to around and about the middle. I'm just going to put a little double pin here just to remind me. We're going to leave a little gap so that we can turn it right side out in a few minutes, and then continue to sew all the way down to the short end and across at the bottom. Next, using a pair of scissors, half the seam allowance and trim the corners. Then turn it right sides out. I'm going to use this prim turning tool to assist me as I turn it right side out. But obviously you could use a safety pin or all sorts of other ways. Once you've turned it right side out, you can then just give it a nice neat press, and if you want to, top stitch around the edges, and then we'll feed it through the top. Make sure that you close up this space here so that it's sitting nice and straight. Okay, we are going to now pop a little safety pin into one end of our lovely little tie waist feature, and then we're going to thread it through this gap here, and we're just going to continue to thread it all the way through the entire waist casing of the dress, and then we are going to go and try it on. So here is our hacked Tracey jacket. We have created a gorgeous shirt dress with an integrated drawstring waistband and an elasticated cuff. All these details completely transform the garment and just make it a wonderful garment to be wearing all year round. So thank you for joining me today. I've been Izzy at Minerva. It's been so fun to draft out this little pattern hack for you today. I do hope you really enjoyed it. So thank you for joining me today.